Hi and welcome to the August episode of Rise High Live, where today we are going to be tackling the topic of subdivision and development. We had a property seminar recently on the topic of subdivision and development, and it was fantastic. In fact, it was so popular that we filled the house, and we know that there were some people that missed out that really wanted to be there. So we thought that today we'd run the Facebook Live session on the topic of subdivision and development. I'm going to go over a few things that we covered in the seminar, but I'm also going to go over some extra things as well. And I know we've actually had quite a few questions come through from the audience, so thank you so much, guys. I will try and get to all of your questions today. If you do have a question while the session is running, you can write a comment in the Facebook Live as it's going, and we can answer the questions. You can also email amanda@risehigh.com.au. Amanda's in the room with me today, and she will read out any questions that we get throughout the course of this session. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, just before we get started, I have some really exciting news. It's been a really exciting day in the Rise High office today for two reasons. Firstly, very excited to announce that in a few months' time, Rise High will have a brand new office, and today we got council approval for our new office. So we were having a little celebration in the office today. It's been a few months coming, and we're super excited about that. So watch this space and you'll get the updates on our new office and how that's coming along. Secondly, some of you might be aware, but I've been working for years on writing a property investment book. I've been an investor since I was 18, and I have finally written the book that I've always wanted to write, and as of today, the book website has been launched. So super excited. If you want to check it out, it's risehighinvestor.com.au. That was risehighinvestor.com.au. Also, we only have 2 more property seminars coming up for the rest of the year. We have a seminar for property investing using your self-managed super fund. So that basically means using your superannuation to buy an investment property. That seminar is running on the 26th of September, and registrations are open for that. We've already got quite a few registrations for that, so I think it will be popular. If you're keen, get in quickly. Secondly, we actually have another seminar that we're running on the 12th of September, which is Pathways to Home Ownership, and that's really targeted at females who have recently come out of a relationship, and they're really looking to get back on their feet and work out how they can rebuild their financial life and get into home ownership. So that's running on the 12th of September. You'll find details for both of these seminars on our website and on our Facebook page. So if you're keen and you want to come along, we'd love to see you there. So let's get on with the topic. Once again, subdivision and development, would love to get your questions. The reason why we run these sessions live is because we love the interaction. So please filter them through the comment section or email them to amanda@risehigh.com.au. So what I'm planning to cover today is 3 things. Firstly, I want to look at the pros and cons of using subdivision and development in your property investment strategy to build wealth. Secondly, I want to talk about the team that you need to build around you to make sure that your subdivision and development is a success. And thirdly, I'm going to go through some recommended steps just to make sure that nothing gets missed, and you go through all the things that you need to go through to ensure that your project is successful. So let's deal with the pros and cons first. Well, obviously, the thing that attracts people to subdivision and development as part of their property investment strategy is the ability to make extra money, the ability to instantly generate your own equity and profit, and the ability to potentially increase your rental income and your rental return. Basically with this, so these are basically the positives of subdivision and development. Okay, so just to summarize, you can make extra equity and have extra rental return. If we look at some of the negatives though, and some of the risks involved, there obviously is a larger element of risk than just buying an established investment property, renting it out and holding it. Firstly, you really do need to have access to more cash. So if you are undertaking a subdivision development project, you need to have access to cash as a buffer. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but basically you need to make sure that you're in a strong financial position where you can actually ensure that you've got a bit left over in the kitty for things that come up, and things will come up. There is a higher level of risk involved, and obviously the bigger the project, the more money you're spending, the bigger the risk. So you need to make sure that you're undertaking a project that not only allows you to achieve your goals, but also allows you to sleep at night. There is also the holding costs involved. So subdivision development projects, depending on the time frame involved in completing them, can have a fairly significant period of holding costs, which means you're having to pay for the loan before you're actually getting any rental income coming through. And this can be problematic if cash flow's tight and if you haven't allowed for that in your budget. The other thing that's really important is that sometimes market timing can play a bit of a role. And particularly if you're planning to sell the properties at completion of your project. So if you're planning to sell the properties that you're building, then market timing can play a significant role in terms of determining how much profit you make with the properties. If you've got all of your properties coming onto market at the same time for sale or for rent, obviously that is something that you need to take into consideration and make sure that it's a risk that you've mitigated against. The other thing with the subdivision and development, depending on the size of the project, cost of finance can sometimes be a little bit more expensive than what you might be used to in terms of just buying a normal residential investment property. Okay, so depending on the size of the project, it may actually go from not being a residential investment loan anymore, it may actually have to go into the territory of being a commercial investment loan, which means that there's different interest rates and fees associated with that. Okay, so there's a bit of a summary. Obviously there's some really great potential to make great money in subdivision development, but there is also risks and things that you need to take into consideration. At this point, just want to make a shout out to Vanessa, Georgia, Kristen, Argy and Tareen. Thanks guys for tuning in. We really appreciate your time and thanks for being here. I'm going to move on to talking about the team that you need to build to make sure this is a success. Now, I think the team is a really important factor, because if you get the right people on your team, the right experts who not only know what they're doing from a theoretical perspective, but also have the practical experience, either they've been through subdivision development themselves or they've helped many clients go through what you are wanting to achieve. So first and foremost, you've got to start with an awesome mortgage broker. Your subdivision and development project will not be able to proceed without the finance. Getting the right finance is critical to making your project a success. So obviously the right mortgage broker is hugely important. Given that you're tuning in here, I'm just going to plug Rise High Financial Solutions. Obviously we'd love to help you and we're very experienced in this area. The other area that you really need to focus on is getting a great accountant. Now, when you are undertaking a subdivision or development, I'm guessing that your aim is to make some money down the track. Depending on what your plan is long term with the project, you need to make sure that you get the ownership structure right from day one. If the ownership structure is not right, you will miss out on tax deductions and you will lose money overall. So that is a really important factor. Tax is critical to get right, and the accountant is going to be critical to helping you choose the right ownership structure and ensure that everything's set up correctly to ensure that you get the best result long term possible. The other person that you're going to need on your team is a great builder or project manager who is very experienced at managing projects similar to the size that you were actually undertaking. So you want someone on your side that knows what they're doing, that's going to build to a budget and to a specific time frame, fixed price contract, fixed time frame with penalties for the builder if they exceed that time frame. You want to make sure that you can trust and rely on the builder and project manager that you've selected to undertake the construction of your project. You're also going to need a great property manager and real estate sales agent. So if you are actually planning to hold the properties after the subdivision's complete, then I would suggest that you get your property manager on board early on when you're at the planning stages and show them what you're planning to do and get an idea of what tenants would appreciate in that area so that you can ensure that you've allowed for that in your planning phase. Similarly, if you're planning to sell the properties at the completion of your project, then have that same conversation with the real estate agent that's likely to sell the properties. if you have these conversations with the people that are going to have to market the properties at the end of the project, then you're more likely to be able to incorporate certain elements to the properties that will make them more attractive to the tenant or more attractive to the purchasers. You might also need an architect. So sometimes the builder that you choose will actually provide the architect service incorporated in the building costs. Other times you might actually have to find and source your own architect. Now, there are some architects that specialise in maximising the use of a block of land. So obviously, if you're wanting to make the most amount of money from a subdivision, then you want to make the best use of the land possible. And a good architect will be able to help you with that and help you with council approvals, okay? The other two people that you're going to need is a surveyor and a conveyancer. So a surveyor will basically help you to mark out the subdivisions on the land and also get the subdivision approval from council. And a conveyancer is going to be able to help you with all the legal aspects of subdividing your land when it's time to do that. So this is basically the people that you're going to need. Obviously, it's a little bit of an overwhelming list, especially if you don't have many of those experts in your networks currently. But if generally if you find one good expert that can help you, like say for example, if you come and see us at Rise High, we can actually put you in touch with and introduce you to experts that we've worked with other clients that we've found have had a good experience with those experts in those areas. So if you are missing a few of them and you've got a few gaps that you need to fill, don't stress. Tell us where the gaps are and we can help you fill those to ensure that the team that you've got is the right team to help you through the project. Okay, let's move on to recommended steps. Firstly, I've broken it down into 11 recommended steps, okay? So first and foremost, you need to understand your borrowing capacity. It's really important to know what you can and can't afford to do, okay? This is going to be a critical stage, and it's important to sit down with your mortgage broker, talk about your plans, talk about what you'd like to do, and run some hypothetical scenarios. Make sure that you can afford to do what you want to do, okay? Once you know what your borrowing capacity is, you're able to go to step 2, which is really then searching and finding the property, okay? And you need to find the property with the potential for the type of project that you want to do. Let's say, for example, you want to do a hammerhead development where you can keep the existing house and you maybe build another house or another couple at the back. Then you're looking for a property obviously with a wide driveway and a big backyard that will allow you to achieve that. Or maybe you're looking for, a small development site. Maybe you're looking for a larger development site. So step 2 is really about finding the right property that fits your strategy, that fits your borrowing capacity. Step 3, once you think you've located a property that might be suitable, speak to council, okay? Ring the council where the property is located and ask to speak to their planning department. Ask to find out the zoning, find out, get a copy of the development plan, find out what your subdivision options are. Tell council what you plan to do with the block and ask them if it's possible. They'll quickly tell you yes or no, and it's a really important step to ensure that you're not buying something that is not going to be, that you're not buying something on the condition that you're going to be able to do something great with it, and then you find out after settlement that council won't approve it. We need to get council on board early, so call them before you make an offer. I've found councils to be very helpful in this area and generally willing to give you any information because they're obviously keen to ensure that if you do buy it, you are complying with their development plan. The next thing to do is if you find a block of land and council said, yep, what you want to do is fine, then you really need to research rental and house values of similar houses to what you're going to end up with in your subdivision project. So what you can do basically is you can go on realestate.com, you can speak to property managers, speak to real estate agents and find out, what will these properties rent for on completion? What will the house values be worth on completion? And once you know that, you can start to get an idea of what the properties are going to be worth on completion and what the rental income is going to be. This is going to be really important in ensuring that your numbers stack up when you come to the feasibility of the project. So we're up to step 6. If you haven't already done this, step 6 is to get a pre-approval, okay? Now it might be that you've already done this stage. If you haven't, definitely do it at this stage before you make an offer preferably, and also at this stage you want to make sure that you've spoken to your accountant and that you've got the right ownership structure, because the ownership structure must be decided before you buy the property, okay? If you happen to find the perfect property and you haven't had a chance to speak to your accountant yet, make sure you sign the contract and or nominees to give you the opportunity to negotiate the ownership prior to settlement. Okay, that's a really important factor. We're up to step 7. By this stage, you've worked out your borrowing capacity, you've found the right property, you've spoken to council, you know what the properties will be worth or likely be worth and what they'll be getting from rental income at the end, and you're ready to make an offer. Okay, you're ready to make an offer for this property. Preferably, you would make an offer subject to finance. Even though you have a pre-approval, it's really good if you can make it subject to finance, as it will protect you in the case of the valuation coming in short. It is also a great idea if you can request a long settlement. The reason why I suggest that is because if you are planning to subdivide or develop the site, you're going to have to go through the council approval process to get approval for that subdivision and development. That's going to take several months. If you can start that process before settlement, then you're actually saving yourself some of the holding costs after settlement. Okay? So if you can negotiate a longer settlement date and doesn't impact on the purchase price too much, that could be an advantage for you. So once you've made your offer's been accepted, you can actually start getting subdivision plans drawn up. So this is where your architect or potentially your builder that has an in-house architect would come in and they would look at the site and draw up the plans, okay? They need to ensure that we've got adequate setbacks, adequate private open space, and then it's going to meet all of the council's requirements. Then you're ready for step number 9, which is getting council approval. You're going to need council approval for demolition of the existing property, if that's what you're doing. You're going to need council approval for subdivision, and you're going to need council approval for development. Now, if you are building a larger scale subdivision or development and you want to do it in stages, you can actually get staged subdivision approval, which means that you get all the approval up front, but the approval is for a staged subdivision. And that can be a great way of managing your costs and your risk as you go for a larger project. Step 10 is obviously complete your project. That's the construction phase of the project and getting you from start to finish. And finally, step 11 is basically you're at the end of the project, the houses are completed, and now it's time to get the houses revalued and explore the refinance options. So that was a bit of an overview of the steps involved. I hope that's helped. We've got a few shout outs and it looks like Amanda's waving to me. There's a few questions coming through. Shout out to Louise, Amy and Sue. Thanks for joining in, girls. Really appreciate you being here. So over to you, Amanda. We've got some questions, I believe.
Yep, so we've got a question from Nathan. How much cash buffer should you have when embarking on a subdivision development project?
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Nathan, for that question. That's great. So look, the cash buffer, there's no really set rule about that, but I like to see our clients have at least a minimum 15% cash buffer of the total project value. Obviously it really depends on the level of risk associated with the project, and it depends on a number of factors, but I would definitely be making sure that you're talking to your mortgage broker, you're talking to your builder, and ensuring that you are going to have enough cash set aside to cover any of those unexpected things that pop up through the process, and there will be things. So make sure you've got that cash buffer available. Thanks for your question, Nathan. Hope that helped.
Great.
Next question.
So we've got a question from Joe. So from a finance perspective, what is the difference if I plan to sell versus hold the new houses once the subdivision project is completed?
That's a great question, Joe. Thanks for the question. Thanks for tuning in. So from a finance perspective, if you're planning to sell versus to hold, so the banks will look at it slightly differently. So if you're planning to hold the properties at the completion of the project, we can actually take the rental income the proposed rental income that you will get from the completed houses into account when we're assessing servicing capability. So for example, if your current income is not sufficient to service the total loan that you need for the subdivision, we can actually look at what the properties will rent for on completion of the project, and we can take that into account in terms of working out servicing. If you're planning to sell the houses, it's a little bit trickier. If you can't actually prove to the bank that you can afford to keep them rented out, then sometimes the bank will request that there are pre-sales, which means you've actually pre-sold the houses before they will grant finance approval. So there are a few different elements there. It does depend on the size of the project, but obviously it's really good if we can make it service based on your current income as well as the proposed rental income from the completed houses. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for your question.
So we have another question from Hannah. There was a story on Four Corners recently about potential mortgage stress if interest rates rise. Do you think this will be a problem?
Yeah, thanks for, was it Hannah?
Yes.
Thanks, Hannah, for your question. So this is interesting. Obviously, there has been a little bit of talk in the media about mortgage stress, particularly in the eastern states, not too much in SA. And, there is concern that in some pockets, some people may have leveraged a bit too high and perhaps push their lending a little bit beyond the max, and if interest rates do go up, it could hurt them. And look, there is a possibility that if interest rates go up, there will be a few people affected by that. I think if you are in the position where interest rates at the moment or your mortgage repayments are quite tight in terms of your family budget, then looking at fixed rates at the moment would really be a great thing to consider. Fixed rates are still very attractive, and that would give you certainty over a period of time, which I think is the answer for people that are fearing an interest rate rise. So it is inevitable that interest rates will rise because they are at record lows. So everyone needs to prepare for that. But I think that Australian property will be fine. I don't think we'll see a big problem from it. It's just that if you are in the position where mortgage repayments are tight currently, then I would recommend talking to us about fixing your loan so that you could have that security and certainty so that you're not impacted if interest rates increase. So thanks so much for your question.
So we've got another one from Angus. Do I have to use my own cash to fund the holding costs during construction, or is there another option?
Okay, Angus, so that's an awesome question. So in regards to the holding costs, obviously the holding costs can be quite significant, especially if it's a long project time frame. So if you do have sufficient equity and sufficient servicing capacity, then there is a potential that we could we could actually get an increased loan amount, and we could capitalise some of the interest during the construction phase. So basically we're funding the interest out of increased debt. So that is a possibility if you don't want to use your own cash, but it's really on a case-by-case basis depending on your personal circumstances and whether you've got the borrowing capacity to do that. So thanks for your help, for your question, Angus, and thanks for tuning in tonight.
So we've got a question from Lucy. Hi Marissa, it is great that you have written a property investment book. What does the book cover and who is it for?
Hi Lucy, thanks for your question. So I have been wanting to write this book for a number of years, and this book is basically basically everything that I've learned as an investor over the last 17 years. And it's basically for anyone that wants to build wealth through property investment and wants to do it over the long term. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is really about a low-risk, long-term wealth generation strategy through property investment. And I think that all property investors will get something out of the book, but I think that the people that will benefit the most from the book are people that are potentially beginner investors, or they've only sort of less than 5 years into their investment journey, and they're really wanting to understand how the journey flows through, over their future and how it's going to get them to where they want to go. So I'm hoping that it brings massive value to a lot of people. And if you do want to find out more about the book, like I said in the beginning of the session, you can check out the book website, which is Rise High Investor .com.au, and it's got heaps of information about the book, chapter summaries. I've also got heaps of bonus resources which will be really handy for the readers. So I hope that you get massive value out of it. Thanks for the question, Lucy.
Right, so we've got another one from Nick. When applying for finance for a subdivision development project, what will the bank look to hold as security, and how much income will I need to support the finance application?
Okay, Nick, great question. So when we are looking at a subdivision or development project, the bank will often be willing to take into consideration the end value of the project in terms of the security. So if you don't have enough equity and security in your current assets to be able to facilitate the borrowing, we can actually get the subdivided houses valued by a valuer before you start construction, and we can actually get the bank to rely on that end value. Generally speaking, the valuers will give us a better outcome and a better result with the valuation if the subdivision's already completed before the valuation happens. But if that's not possible, then it's still able to, be valued at that point. In terms of the income, like I said before, the bank can take into consideration not only your current income, but also take into consideration the potential rental income that you'll get from the completed houses once the subdivision is over. So I hope that answers your question, Nick. Thanks for tuning in.
Great, so we've got another question from Liz. You mentioned cost of finance. For what size project is the finance likely to switch from a residential investment loan to a commercial investment loan, and what are the main differences between them?
Okay, thanks Liz, thanks for your question. So if your project is a smaller project, so say for example you're knocking down one house and building two, or maybe you're even knocking down one house and building three, maybe even up to four, may still be considered by some banks as a residential project. If you are doing more than four, then generally it will be considered in the commercial space, even if you're building residential houses. And in terms of the differences, commercial finance generally attracts a slightly higher interest rate, although now with now that interest-only investment loans on the residential side are actually creeping up in cost, it's probably fairly comparable with the interest rates that you'd get on the commercial side. Probably the main difference is that we can get free valuations on the residential side, whereas on the commercial side we may have to pay for them. We also will have additional fees on the commercial side that may not be applicable on the residential side. So overall, there won't be a huge difference in the current market, but there may be some additional fees on the commercial side. So we just need to make sure we've factored them into your cost analysis and ensure that you factor them into your plan.
Great, so we've got another question from Blake. What sort of property should I look for if I want to do a subdivision?
Okay, Blake, this is a great question. So obviously, there are a lot of different properties that can lend themselves well to subdivision projects. Obviously, the first thing, which is really obvious, is it needs to be a large block of land. So if you're looking for a property, you need to find something large enough to subdivide. So it does vary in different council areas and different zoning, but maybe you're looking for something at least 750 square metres. Realestate.com has a really good advanced search feature where you can search by land size. You can also search by wording, and you can actually put in the word development in there, and it will bring up all of the properties that real estate agents have highlighted have development potential in a particular area. The other thing to look for is large street frontage. So you're looking for a site that's got at least sort of 7 metres per dwelling that you're hoping to put on there. So you need large street frontage, large block. If you can get a site with a large driveway, that could lend itself well to a hammerhead development. You're wanting something with level or gently sloping land, so it's, fairly easy to build on with not a lot of additional cost. And, look for properties with opportunity, like large corner blocks or blocks with wide driveways with large backyards. Or potentially, if you already have an investment property, put that property, set up a search, an alert on realestate.com and Domain to make sure that you're advised if any of the neighbouring properties next to your existing properties come up for sale, because that can also be a great way to get a site ready for subdivision and development. It's kind of like the Monopoly game. If you can buy two blocks next to each other, then you've got more land to play with and more possibility, more opportunities. Hope that answers your question, Blake. Thanks so much for tuning in. So I think we're nearly at the end of question time. I think that's all the questions. Is that it, Amanda?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. So just a quick reminder, we do have our self-managed super fund property investment seminar coming up on the 26th of September. We also have a pathway to home ownership seminar for single females on the 12th of September. And don't forget to check out the risehighinvestor.com.au. And thanks so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your time and hope you have an awesome night. Thanks. We'll see you next time.